Zainab woke up in her bright Accra apartment with a smile on her face. Today was her birthday, and she could feel the excitement buzzing through her chest. She imagined a day full of laughter, surprises, and gifts from her husband, Tay, and friends. She pictured the living room decorated with balloons and her favorite flowers, a cake waiting to be sliced, and warm hugs from the people she cared about. For once, she thought, everything would be just for her. But the moment she stepped into the living room, her heart dropped. Tay was standing in the center, a smug expression on his face, a lighter in hand. Before she could even ask what he was doing, he set fire to all the carefully wrapped gifts, one by one, while their friends watched, frozen in shock. The smell of burnt paper and the crackling flames filled the room. Zainab's hands shook, tears stinging her eyes. She felt her world shrink, every ounce of joy and excitement crushed in front of everyone she knew. For a long moment, she could only stand there, stunned and humiliated. But deep inside, a spark flickered. Something in her refused to stay broken. The anger, the embarrassment, the disbelief, they all merged into a quiet, simmering determination. She wouldn't let this define her. Zainab wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and realized that maybe this disaster was the beginning of something bigger, a turning point she hadn't expected, but was ready to face. Her birthday had started with fire, but it also lit something inside her that no one could burn away. After the birthday disaster, Zainab spent the next few days in a haze. Friends and family called, visited, and sent messages, trying to comfort her. They told her it wasn't her fault, that Tay's behavior was cruel, even shocking. But their words felt hollow. Every time she tried to speak, the memory of him burning her gifts in front of everyone came rushing back, and she felt small, powerless, like a character trapped in someone else's story. As she sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, Zainab started thinking about her marriage. She remembered the little ways Tay controlled her, deciding where they should go, who she could meet, even how she spent her own money. At first, she had ignored it, thinking it was normal. Now, the pattern was clear, and the pieces of her humiliation fell into place. She realized the birthday incident wasn't just cruelty. It was Tay showing loudly that he could control her, make her feel worthless. Then things started to feel even stranger. She noticed his phone buzzing late at night, calls he wouldn't take in front of her. Bills and bank statements appeared in their mailbox with strange entries, amounts she couldn't explain. Something was off, and her gut told her it wasn't just about money. It was about secrets, about Tay keeping control where she least expected it. Zainab's anger simmered quietly. She didn't show it yet, not to her friends, not to Tay. But inside, a plan was forming. She would no longer be powerless. She would watch, learn, and wait. Every secret he kept, every lie he told, was a crack in his armor. She would find them, piece them together, and use them to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her strength. For the first time in a long time, Zainab felt a strange sense of calm. The humiliation still stung, but now it carried a new energy, a quiet fire. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing to fight back, carefully, strategically, and in a way that Tay could never see coming. Zainab knew she had to be careful. Tay was arrogant, but he was also clever, and any sudden move could tip him off. So she started quietly, observing him, taking notes on his habits, the times he made calls, the way he handled their finances. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing. This was hers alone. Every detail, no matter how small, felt like a piece of a puzzle she was determined to solve. She reached out to Amani, her old friend from university, who had a reputation for being sharp with technology and numbers. Over cups of tea in the corner of a small cafe, Zainab explained her suspicions without revealing the full story. Amani listened carefully, nodding, and promised to help, using her skills to look for patterns and traces that might otherwise go unnoticed. It didn't take long before they found something. Hidden accounts, transfers to places Zainab had never heard of, and investments that Tay had never mentioned. It was clear now, he had been hiding money and assets, likely to control her, to keep her dependent, or perhaps for some secret project of his own. The discovery hit hard at first. Anger and shock mixed with a strange satisfaction. Finally, she had proof that he wasn't invincible. Zainab felt a rush of determination she hadn't felt before. All the humiliation, the controlling behavior, the lies, they were pieces of a system she was now beginning to understand. For the first time, she felt the balance shifting, even if only slightly. Every secret Tay thought he could hide was now a tool she could use. That night, as she sat in the soft glow of her desk lamp, Zainab allowed herself a small, private smile. She had started quietly, but she was already moving. With Amani's help, she would gather every clue, uncover every secret, and plan her next steps carefully. Tay had underestimated her, but that mistake would cost him. The humiliation she endured would become the foundation of her power. Zainab wasn't just watching anymore. She was ready to act. Zainab realized that uncovering Tay's secrets was only the first step. She needed a plan, one that was smart, careful, and completely legal. She spent hours reading about financial regulations and legal loopholes in Ghana, searching for ways to protect herself and gain control over what Tay had tried to hide. Every evening, she sat at her kitchen table with papers, her laptop open, and notes scattered around her like a puzzle she was determined to solve. She knew she couldn't do it all alone, so she reached out to Kwame, a trusted lawyer friend. They met in his office, tucked away in a quiet street of Accra. Zainab explained that she suspected Tay of hiding assets, carefully avoiding the details of her full plan. Kwame listened, asking pointed questions and taking notes, clearly impressed by her careful approach. He outlined the legal options available, ways to access information, trace accounts, and document her findings without ever stepping outside the law. Together, they mapped out a strategy. Zainab would gather evidence discreetly while Kwame prepared the legal framework to secure her claims. They talked about timing, potential obstacles, and how to avoid raising suspicion. Every detail mattered, from keeping Tay unaware to ensuring that every document and account record could stand up in court if needed. As they worked, Zainab felt a shift inside her. The fear and humiliation she had carried for weeks began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was in control, thinking several steps ahead. Each plan, each legal option she explored felt like a victory in itself. She could almost see the moment when all the pieces would come together, when she would no longer be the powerless wife, but a strategist who had turned the tables completely. By the time she left Kwame's office, Zainab felt a new energy coursing through. Her focus was sharp, her purpose clear. The humiliation of her birthday, the anger, the secrets, it had all brought her to this point. She was no longer the victim of Tay's arrogance. She was becoming a careful, patient, and relentless strategist, ready to reclaim her life and her power with intelligence and precision. Tay was in his element. At a high-end restaurant in Accra, surrounded by friends and colleagues, he leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smile on his face. He talked loudly about his investments, his business successes, and how he had everything under control. People listened impressed or maybe intimidated, but Tay didn't care. He enjoyed the attention, the sense of power it gave him, the way everyone seemed to hang on his every word. Meanwhile, Zainab watched quietly from a distance, her anger and determination simmering beneath the surface. She noticed the little things Tay overlooked in his arrogance. The way he bragged about his bank transactions, mentioned transfers to new accounts without a second thought, and joked about keeping certain assets safe from anyone else. To everyone else, it was confidence. To Zainab, it was carelessness, a trail of breadcrumbs he had no idea she was following. Tay had always underestimated her. He saw her as gentle, polite, even a little passive. In his mind, Zainab couldn't challenge him, couldn't match his cunning or ambition. That belief gave him the freedom to be reckless, to flaunt his wealth and dominance without caution. He didn't notice how her eyes tracked every word, every gesture, every subtle hint of hidden accounts or unusual transfers. As the evening went on, his boasting became almost comical to Zainab. He spoke about future investments, new ventures, and secret accounts as if no one else could ever touch them. Each careless admission was a clue, a weak point in the wall he thought was impenetrable. For Zainab, it was a map, proof that Tay's hubris might be his undoing. By the time the night ended, Tay left feeling triumphant, oblivious to the fact that every boast, every brag, had given Zainab more than just information. He had given her leverage. The very arrogance that he wore like armor had cracks, and she was ready to exploit them. For the first time, Zainab didn't feel like the powerless wife he had always thought she was. She felt a quiet, growing satisfaction, knowing that Tay's overconfidence was paving the way for his own downfall. Zainab had spent weeks studying, planning, and observing. Now it was time for her first move. She didn't rush in recklessly. She was careful, precise, and completely within the law. Using legal proxies and authorized access methods she had researched with Kwame, she quietly began monitoring Tay's accounts. Every transfer, every transaction, every unexpected deposit became part of the picture she was piecing together. No alarms went off, no suspicion arose, and Tay continued on in his arrogance, unaware that his carefully hidden world was quietly being exposed. At first, it felt strange to manipulate the accounts, even legally. But Zainab reminded herself that Tay had used money and secrecy to control her for years. Now the same tools were hers to use. She redirected small amounts, reclaimed assets he had tried to hide, and ensured that nothing she touched could be traced back to her. Each successful move was a small victory, a way of regaining control over what he had always tried to dominate. With every step, Zainab's confidence grew. She was no longer reacting to his cruelty. She was acting with strategy and purpose. She felt the humiliation of her birthday fade into a distant memory, replaced by a quiet thrill of empowerment. Her plan was working, and she was learning how powerful patience, intelligence, and careful observation could be. Even as she monitored and maneuvered behind the scenes, Zainab kept her life outwardly normal. To friends and family, she was still the same gentle, unassuming woman. But inside, she was transforming. Each legal, precise action made her bolder, more focused, more determined. She could see the path ahead clearly now, the final step where everything would come together. That night, as she closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, Zainab allowed herself a moment to smile. She had begun to turn the tables. Tay's arrogance had given her the advantage, and she was using it with skill and care. The first move was complete, and she was ready for the next phase. Nothing would stop her from reclaiming what was hers, and when the time came, Tay would finally realize that underestimating her had been his biggest mistake. The evening was set for a grand family dinner, one of those gatherings in Accra where everyone important seemed to be in the same room. Zainab arrived quietly, dressed elegantly but simply, carrying herself with a calm confidence that caught a few eyes. Tay, oblivious as ever, was already boasting to relatives and colleagues about his wealth and business successes. He didn't notice the subtle shift in Zainab's demeanor, the way she held herself, the quiet certainty in her eyes. As the dinner progressed, laughter and chatter filled the room, and Tay continued to dominate the conversation. Then, at just the right moment, Zainab stood. The room gradually quieted, curious about her sudden attention. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, explaining that she had been reviewing their finances carefully, just as any responsible partner would. Then she dropped the bombshell. She had traced Tay's secret bank account. She presented the proof she had painstakingly gathered, the documents, the transactions, and the patterns that left no room for doubt. Gasps echoed through the room. Friends, family, and colleagues stared at Tay, now frozen in disbelief. His face turned pale as he struggled to find words. The arrogance he had worn like armor now felt useless, and the credibility he had built for years crumbled in an instant. Everyone could see the truth. Zainab had not only uncovered his deception but had done it with intelligence, patience, and strategic skill. For Zainab, this moment was more than just exposing Tay. It was her own declaration of strength, a public reclaiming of dignity she had lost during that humiliating birthday. The same friends and relatives who had once seen her as powerless now watched her rise with admiration, realizing that she had been quietly turning the tables all along. Tay tried to speak, to explain, but no one listened. His credibility was gone, and his ego was shattered. Meanwhile, Zainab remained composed, her confidence unshaken. The room was no longer a stage for his arrogance. It belonged, for that moment, to her. The humiliation she had endured, the anger she had felt, and the careful planning she had executed had all led to this victorious reveal. In one evening, Zainab had transformed from the embarrassed wife into a woman whose intelligence and courage demanded respect, leaving everyone, including Tay, stunned by the power of her quiet determination. After the public reveal, Zainab knew the next step was to make her victory official. She worked closely with Kwame, her trusted lawyer friend, to ensure every legal detail was covered. They went through Tay's hidden accounts, assets, and transactions with a fine-tooth comb, making sure there was no loophole he could exploit to challenge her claim. Every document, every signature, every form was checked and double-checked. Zainab wanted the outcome to be airtight, undeniable, and completely legal. Once the paperwork was finalized, the results were clear. Zainab legally secured rights to a portion of the hidden assets Tay had tried to control. It wasn't just about money, it was a statement. She had taken control of what had been unfairly hidden from her, turning years of secrecy and arrogance against him. Kwame filed everything officially, making Tay's secret accounts public knowledge. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and this time, there was no way back. Word spread quickly among friends, neighbors, and family. People admired Zainab not just for her courage, but for her strategy, intelligence, and patience. They celebrated her brilliance, amazed at how she had turned a humiliating situation into a complete legal and personal victory. Even those who had doubted her ability to act were impressed by how calmly and decisively she had handled everything. For Zainab, the moment was deeply satisfying. The humiliation she had suffered, the control Tay had tried to exert, and the secrecy he had maintained were all undone, not through anger or force, but through careful planning, knowledge, and legal skill. She had proven that intelligence and patience were far more powerful than arrogance or brute control. As she stood among friends and family, accepting their congratulations, Zainab felt a sense of completion. This wasn't just a win over Tay, it was a personal triumph. She had reclaimed her dignity, her power, and her life, showing that a woman underestimated could rise above any obstacle. Tay's secrets had cost him everything, while Zainab's wisdom and determination had secured her a victory that was both legal and deeply satisfying. Zainab knew the final step had to be personal. She arranged to meet Tay alone, away from friends and family, in the quiet of their home. When he saw her, he smiled as if nothing had changed, still carrying the arrogance that had cost him so much. But Zainab didn't return the smile. Instead, she looked him directly in the eyes, calm but unwavering, and spoke with a clarity that left no room for denial. She reminded him of the birthday, of the gifts he had publicly burned, and the humiliation he had inflicted on her in front of everyone. She told him how he had underestimated her, believing she was weak, passive, and incapable of acting against him. She described, step by step, how she had uncovered his secrets, monitored his accounts, and legally reclaimed what he had tried to hide. Every word was precise, measured, and intentional. Tay tried to interrupt, stammering excuses, but Zainab didn't allow it. Her voice remained steady, full of authority, each sentence emphasizing her dignity and the consequences of his arrogance. She made him see the pattern he had ignored. His control, his secrecy, and his pride had blinded him to her intelligence and patience. By the end of the conversation, he was silent, stunned, and humbled, a shadow of the confident man he had been just weeks earlier. Regret clouded his expression, and for the first time, he understood the depth of his mistake. Zainab didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice or seek revenge beyond the truth. She simply reclaimed her power through words, presence, and the undeniable fact that she had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The emotional arc of their confrontation was clear. She had transformed humiliation into strength, anger into strategy, and betrayal into empowerment. As she left the room, Zainab felt a profound sense of self-respect. She had faced the man who had tried to diminish her and emerged victorious, not just legally but emotionally. Tay was left to reflect on his arrogance and failures, while Zainab walked away with confidence, control, and dignity intact. In that quiet, private moment, she proved that true power wasn't about wealth or dominance. It was about intelligence, patience, and the courage to reclaim one's life. She had become a figure of empowerment, a woman who refused to be defined by someone else's cruelty. After everything, Zainab decided to share her story online. She wrote openly about the humiliation she had faced, the secrets she had uncovered, and the careful steps she had taken to reclaim her life. Her words struck a chord with women across Ghana and beyond. Messages flooded in from strangers who had faced similar struggles, thanking her for showing that it was possible to stand up, fight back, and regain control. Her story quickly went viral, earning her the nickname, the woman whose birthday turned into a takeover. Zainab didn't stop at sharing her experience. She used part of the funds she had legally secured from Tay to start her own business, turning her skills and determination into something tangible. At the same time, she launched small philanthropic projects aimed at helping women gain financial independence and legal knowledge. Every business decision and charitable act reinforced the message that intelligence, patience, and courage could change lives. Social media buzzed with her journey. News outlets and online communities highlighted her story, celebrating how she had transformed a personal disaster into a moment of empowerment and inspiration. Women discussed her strategy, her resilience, and the way she had turned cruelty and arrogance into opportunity. Zainab became more than a viral story. She became a symbol of strength, patience, and clever action. Through it all, Zainab proved a powerful lesson. Abuse, arrogance, and underestimating a determined woman can backfire in ways no one expects. What started as a painful humiliation ended as a remarkable reversal of fate, showing that courage, strategy, and self-respect are more powerful than cruelty or control. She had reclaimed her dignity, built her future, and inspired countless others along. Zainab's birthday disaster had become a turning point, not just for her, but for anyone watching her rise.